Hey everyone, super nice to see, well, kind of see everyone here. Today I'm going to be talking about how to think about your marketing at each stage of your journey. So I'm just going to share my screen and hold on, give me a second. How do I?
Not able to share, Lesley?
I'm trying to figure out how to share like a full screen presenter view.
You may.
Okay, cool. Hold on, give me a second. Here we go.
There we go. We can see it. Yep.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about how to think about marketing at each stage of your journey. This is something that I just went through personally, or I'm still going through. Hey, Peter from Germany. So this is something that I'm still going through myself. And this is very much a presentation live from the trenches. So if you heard Adrian speaking at the start of Groundhog Day, he spoke about how, I'm kind of like 1 or 2 years behind him, and we've been growing our plugin as well. And Adrian has himself been a huge help in our own journey. And so this is kind of my story, my marketing story, and the framework that I've used to help me kind of think about what to do at each stage of the journey. So the framework that I use is something that I kind of came up with myself. You'll kind of recognize a lot of the thinking behind it. And it's basically a framework that I call the one to some to many framework. And I really like thinking of it this way because it makes sure that you don't get ahead of yourself. You don't try to do things that, you've seen Google do, or you've seen like Slack do. They have a cool TV ad and you want to make a cool TV ad. And that's kind of like getting ahead of yourself. And so when you apply this framework, which again, like it might seem kind of familiar to you, it just kind of helps you do the right thing at the right time to get the results that you want. So before I go in detail about what that is, I just want to talk a little bit about me. So hi, I'm Lesley. I live in Singapore. It's 10 p.m. right now. And it's
thank you for attending so late.
No worries. For anyone who cares, it's Chinese New Year. So there's like a whole like thing about Chinese New Year. It's kind of like Christmas in the West. So we celebrate Christmas, and then like a couple of months later we celebrate Chinese New Year again, and it's cool. We basically like do no work from December to February. Yeah, and so I'm the founder of a plugin called Newsletter Glue, which is what NG stands for over here. We're a newsletter plugin, so we let you connect your email service provider, and soon Groundhogg, fingers crossed, we're working on that right now. We let you connect that to WordPress and use the block editor to build your emails. So we're kind of like an email builder, but we let you use the block editor to do it. So that means that writing emails becomes exactly like writing a blog post. So super easy, drag and drop, add all sorts of custom blocks that we've built. And yeah, so customers say that we save them 1 or 2 hours per newsletter. So if you're really sick of fiddling with email HTML and having broken emails, come look for us. So that's me. And now you kind of like know the thing that I've been marketing. Let's talk about the framework. So what is the one to some to many framework? It's a very simple framework. All it means is that at the beginning, you want to market one to one. So like I will market to my friend, so 1 to 1. And then as you scale, you market 1 to some. So that means you leverage someone's audience. So I get on a podcast or come on the Groundhog Day. And then after 1 to some, there's 1 to many, and that's bigger things like content marketing, paid ads, and just kind of the scale just kind of grows. And the reason why this is a really nice framework to use is it, like I said earlier, it ensures that you don't get ahead of yourself. So at the start, before you've got product market fit, before you've got your sales pitch keyed in, before you've like made sure that you have feature parity with your competitors, you actually don't want too many people to know about your product, right? Because if 1 million people know about the thing that is still kind of in a beta mode, you're actually kind of building the wrong reputation. You don't want 1 million people to use your beta product. You want 5 people to use it or 10 people to use it. And once those 5 or 10 people are happy with it, they are singing your praises, then you're like, okay, I think we have something here. Let's get the show on the road. Let's go to one to some. And then that's when you go into a podcast, you get on Twitter a bunch. And then once you've kind of like hit escape velocity, that's when you start, going after the one to many. And so just kind of having that framework, which I'll take you through in the rest of the presentation, helps kind of put you in the right marketing channels, ensures you're going after the right things, ensures that your goals are the correct goals, and you don't get ahead of yourself. And that way, like everything is kind of more, I don't know, like it clicks a bit better. That's how I would put it, at least. Okay, so I guess I covered why as well. So I'm gonna kind of go into each session or each section, and as I talk about it, if people have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat or the Q&A, and I guess Gregory and Adrian can let me know and we can talk about them. And I'm okay to interrupt as well, because like with each stage, there's like a whole bunch of stuff. And so like Adrian, if you have questions, like feel free to talk about them with me as well, because I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, for just the general participation, I want to highly encourage people get to know Lesley and get to know the steps that she's taken. And if you are seeing some similarities between her journey and your own, and you're not really sure what your next step is, ask. You might learn about it throughout this presentation, but if there's something, or maybe you've tried something and it didn't quite work out the way that you thought, let us know in the comments. I'm here, and Gregory is also here, and we're looking at the comment section. And if we've got a link, or if we've got an answer for you, we're going to make sure that you get it by the end.
Cool. Thanks, Adrian. So with each stage, I'll kind of talk about my own experience with it and share like the good things that I did, but also the dumb things that I did and the failures, and kind of talk you through what to expect at each stage. So the one-to-one stage is all about personal outreach. And this is generally the scariest stage, because at the beginning, your product sucks, and rightfully so. Like your product shouldn't be too good at the beginning, because then you've probably kind of over designed without talking to your customers. So let's just like take it for granted that your product sucks at the beginning, and that's a good thing. So your product sucks at the beginning. It's very, very nerve-wracking, and you're talking to people one-on-one to find out what they think about it and whether they think it's useful enough for you to keep building it. So think of it kind of like door-to-door sales, getting on Zoom calls with people, DMing people on Twitter, going on forums, going on Facebook groups, asking if you can message people. These are all things that I did. And like I said, it's super scary. And this isn't something you can outsource. You can't, ask a virtual assistant to get on Twitter DMs for you and do outreach, because you need to know whether your product works or not. And so, yeah, it's scary. So like, let me give you a story about how I started and what my experience doing one-to-one was. So my co-founder and I, we actually started working together. He put a forum message on Indie Hackers looking for a co-founder, because he's a technical guy. He's been building membership plugins for a decade, and he had just come off on his own and wanted to build a membership plugin of his own and sell that. And once he had built and not marketed anything, he realized, oh, you know, if I build it, they will not come. I have to actually do the marketing. And then he tried it, and then he realized that he really didn't like it. And so he decided to look for a co-founder who was able to do the marketing and business side of things. And that's where I came in. I saw his message on Indie Hackers, emailed him, we chatted a little bit, and we decided to work together. So our first product wasn't actually Newsletter Glue. It was a membership plugin. And by the time I came on board, the plugin was already built. And it was kind of my job to then go out, do the personal outreach to try to get it off the ground. And if you know anything about membership plugins in that space, it's a really mature space. There are some excellent plugins already there. And so at the time, we weren't differentiated enough for people to have a reason to use such a young plugin. And so they didn't, literally. So I got on Facebook groups, membership Facebook groups. So basically like Facebook groups that specialize in helping people with membership businesses grow. And I would message people in the group and ask, like, hey, we have this new membership plugin. Can I DM you and give you a free copy of the plugin and let you try it? And yeah, so like a couple of people said yes, and I messaged them. And one person I remember, like I messaged her, she was happy to chat, and she literally told me that just because we have a website up doesn't mean that we are legit, and to come and talk to her when we had more than what we currently had. And like that was really, really harsh, and it frankly was like kind of scary to hear that from a complete stranger, like telling me that my plugin sucked. But that's the kind of feedback that you actually need. So it sucks and it hurts at the time, but you'll never get that feedback if you are trying to do Facebook ads and avoiding the one-to-one. And so learning that really helped me. And soon after that, we realized the membership plugin wasn't taking off. Like we couldn't even get people to try the free version. And so we shut it down. And we ended up pivoting into Newsletter Glue.
I'm going to interrupt you and just because as someone who's invested a lot of time and a lot of money I remember, and in case I've shared this story a couple of times, but I'll just really quickly, we invested over $100,000 last year in Groundhogg 3.0, which is coming for everyone, by the way. But we went in a specific direction and we spent $100,000 going in that direction. Basically, literally all of the profit of the organization was just being refunneled back into R&D. And we got to a point where we scrapped $100,000 worth of code. And that was a very painful decision that we made. And I'm curious, because a lot of people, when they invest a certain amount of time and money into something, there's the sunk cost fallacy. And we continue to invest time and money into an enterprise, which doesn't necessarily have or hasn't achieved product market fit, or for whatever reason, it's just not working out. How did you come to that realization that it wasn't working out and that there was no point, or that your time would be better spent working on something else? Where did that click?
I don't know. It was really obvious. Like it was as though I was knocking on doors and people were literally running and hiding and pretending to not be at home. That's kind of how it felt when I was trying to reach out to people. And you can only feel that if you're doing the one-to-one. Like you can spend $100,000 on Facebook ads and never find this out. And then you like end up spending too much of your life on the wrong thing. But when you are reaching out to people personally, asking them via DMs or email, like, hey, do you want to try this thing out? It's a paid thing, but we're giving it to you for free. And, even then people are not responding and not interested. You're like, okay, there's a problem here. Right. And yeah, so like that's kind of the one-to-one thing. And so I want to contrast my experience with the membership plugin with Newsletter Glue, which is the plugin that we have now. So with Newsletter Glue, how that came about was we built a add-on to the membership plugin that would connect to MailChimp and let you send out newsletters, or let you send out existing blog posts as newsletters. And I built it at the time because Substack was growing and I kind of really liked that feature. And I thought, like it should be really easy to have the same thing on WordPress, and that didn't exist. And so we decided to build it. And I'd started using that for my own newsletter and really enjoyed it and really enjoyed the workflow. And at the time when we were deciding to shut down the membership plugin, I wasn't really sad about closing the membership plugin because, like I said, like it almost felt like people were running and hiding when I would try to, do my door-to-door sales. But I was sad to lose that MailChimp add-on because I used it, or I used it at the time and I depended on it and I really liked it. And then it kind of occurred to me like, hey, if I really liked it and the reason I was sad to lose it was because I couldn't think of any other plugin that did the same thing, then like maybe there was something here. Maybe other people were looking for something like that. And so I embarked on the same journey, did the one-to-one outreach. So this time what I did was I posted a post on Indie Hackers saying like, hey, what if I built this Substack thing, but on WordPress? So like the same flow where you click a button and it publishes to the web, but also sends that same post as an email. And I took that post that I wrote on Indie Hackers and I edited it a bit, posted it in a bunch of Facebook groups. And immediately the response was completely different. People commented on the Indie Hackers post, they commented on the Facebook groups, they were all interested. I followed up with all of them, like, like, hey, cool, like, thanks for your interest. Mind if I DM you? A whole bunch of people said yes, got their emails really easily, got on Zoom calls really easily. I think we got like 100 emails and I got on maybe 10 Zoom calls, which, it doesn't sound like a gigantic number, but when I was coming from people running and hiding when I tried to get in touch with them to people saying like, yes, super interested, let's get on a Zoom call, taking time out from their day to talk to me about this plugin that could potentially help them, like that difference was so big and I knew it immediately, again, because I was doing the one-to-one. And so, yeah, so like that's kind of how you can conceptualize of the one-to-one, and how I suggest you do it as well if you're just starting out. Yeah, so okay, so let's go through the points that I've written on here. So personal outreach, like door-to-door sales, 1 degree of separation. So meaning where all the sales are coming from because you've closed those people directly. You do it yourself, so you can't outsource this because the valuable thing here is the insights and kind of like being direct in the line of fire when people say yes or no, because that's what you want to know for yourself and for the product. And the result is that you learn what really matters to people. When you have something that people want, like in the case of Newsletter Glue, like we hadn't even built it. I didn't have a name when I first wrote the Indie Hackers post and I posted on Facebook groups, but people were already interested. I didn't have a website. I didn't have anything. All I had was like this concept and people were interested enough to get on a Zoom call and talk about it. And when you do the one-to-one, there's no hiding. So you can't hide behind scale, which people often like to talk about. They like to do Facebook ads. They like to do content marketing. But that allows you to hide. It allows you to not kind of bury your head in the sand. So when you do one-to-one, there's no hiding and it lets you practice your pitch and you can see immediately in real time whether it works. Because sometimes like it's not even that your product is wrong. It might be that your pitch is wrong or your positioning is wrong. And so these are all little things that you can tweak, but you can only tweak them in real time when you talk to someone and you see if it resonates with them.
I literally don't think I could have said that any better. I remember when 3 years ago, when I first pushed out Groundhogg, I spent $3,000 on Facebook ads before I talked to anybody. And that was
And
immediately
it's like
just
exactly because you were hiding, right?
and yeah, you want to hide. Be like when we think about, oh, we have this new software product, you think of like Facebook, Google, Zoom, like these behemoth companies which hide behind scale, right? There's no face associated with that. But you know, in reality, like I was at that point in time just one person. Right. And so hiding behind scale is really just a facade that we use to protect our own ego and to protect ourselves from that kind of brutal feedback that you receive early on. But you're absolutely right. Like without that feedback, you can't learn and you can't grow and you can't tailor your solution to the people that can actually benefit from it. I remember that, you know, and you also don't meet people, right? Like like when I was doing the one-to-one thing early on, I met people like Chris Badgett, who has been just an absolute major influence on our organization, and Chris Lemma and Jack Ratura. And when you're doing these one-to-one things, you meet people. And then when you're doing your one-to-one, you met me, and now you're on, you know, speaking on my event. So it really goes to show that, you know, having that phase and just being the face, right, also pays dividends in perpetuity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And like speaking of paying dividends, it's like you're setting the right foundation for everything, right? For your marketing, for your messaging, your positioning, the relationships, even like the thickness of your skin. Because like as your business grows, it only gets harder. And if you're not even willing to put yourself out there at the start, you're going to have a lot of trouble when things like really grow and real problems. So like
If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's talk about the next one. So we've done like one-to-one, and then now we're moving on to one-to-some, which is kind of the middle bit. And so with this one, the idea here is that you want to leverage other people's audiences. And what that means is like, you know, let's say Adrian has Groundhog Day. So you leverage his event and come on here and talk about your experiences and, you know, give your advice. You know, likewise with podcasts, guest posts, live streams, all of those things. So, and the reason why you want to leverage other people's audience is because at the start, you are unlikely to have your own audience. Not everyone starts a company with 10,000 Twitter followers. So if you're starting with 5, then, you know, you tweeting into the void isn't that useful. So what you want to do is leverage other people's audience, get on their shows, get on their mailing lists, and get in front of the audience that they've grown. And so what it kind of like looks like is 2 degrees of separation. So what I mean by that is you can tell when your sales spike from being on a podcast. So you can tell when a sales spike if you come on Groundhog Day, for example, or you go on a live stream. And so it's like still very easy to tell where your sales is coming from. You might not be personally closing every single sale anymore, but it's still kind of easy to tell. So to give kind of an example from my story is closely matched. Okay, so I need to be louder. Should I stop and change this, or should I just keep going? And
what I might do is thanks by the way, Ken. Sorry for don't worry about internet flow. It's just apparently we have a little bit of an audio level mismatch.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah, that's a lot louder. I can hear you more clearly. So I think just leave it there
cool.
for now. I think that should be good. Ken, let us know if that works out for you.
Perfect. Okay. So the next thing, so we're talking about one-to-some, and I was going to give an example from my experience. And so the thing that we really focused on last year was building in public. And so the thing that we did was I started just getting really active on Twitter. And it sounds weird, but like the way that I did it was instead of trying to grow my own Twitter following and like get to 10K or 100K followers on Twitter, I use Twitter as a place to meet other plugin owners, meet people in the WordPress industry, and kind of like get in front of them. And by doing that, it made me and the plugin seem more legitimate and allowed me to get onto their shows and their podcasts and so on and so forth. Okay, I'm going to close this chat because now it's distracting. And Adrian, if there's anything, you can just let me know, I guess.
The only thing is that Zane missed the turning point, but I'm replying to him in chat, so don't worry about it. Keep going.
Okay, cool. And yeah, so like the way that I built in public wasn't from a one-to-many perspective. It was a one-to-some perspective. And again, the way I did this was from getting to know people through Twitter, getting to know people like Adrian, Jack, Chris Lemmer, all through Twitter, and building up a reputation by showing up every day, by talking about stuff that people were interested in, by showing my own expertise, and just generally being available and like showing people what we were working on. At the time, I think I started with like 30 followers in 2020, and then I grew that to 2,000 followers in 2021. But like in 2021, I kind of made a decision to not grow it in a viral way. And that's something that like people don't often talk about. Like people are always trying to go viral on Twitter. They're always trying to grow their following. But the thing that people might not realize is that once you grow too big on Twitter, it just becomes kind of like you shouting to the void. The quality of the interactions goes down as well. People don't know you as much. It's not as high context. And this can be great if you're at a later stage in your journey. So if you're Slack or if you're WooCommerce, like you don't actually want to have direct one-on-one relationships on your Twitter page, because like that would just be crazy, right? But if you're a small plugin like us, having one-to-one relationships is key. And so that's kind of what I started focusing on. In the middle of the year, I stopped trying to grow my Twitter following from like a viral point of view. And I just started following more people in the WordPress industry. I started posting screenshots of the stuff that I was working on without context. So people would have to be following me for a while to know what I was talking about, to follow me on my journey. And that kind of drew people in. And again, it might sound unusual, but it really, really worked. And so I had Twitter. And the other thing that I paid a lot of attention to was paid communities. So the tool that I always talk about is Post Status, poststatus.com. They're kind of like a professional WordPress community. So lots of plugin owners are there, lots of theme owners are there, lots of people from Automatic are in there, even like Matt Mullenweg comes in and chats every now and then, and just kind of contributing and talking in that community, as well as Twitter, made it seem to people who were deep in the WordPress community like I was everywhere, even though I wasn't. I was just in those two places.
And it certainly seems like you are everywhere.
Like all I do is just like those two things.
As someone in your network, I can attest to the fact that your level of consistency is somewhat equate to your reputation at this point.
Thanks.
Yeah. We have a quick question.
Yep.
Someone is really interested in the process of actually getting podcast spots. This is something that I'm fairly familiar with personally, but I'd love to hear how, and because I know you did the whole round, you did every show that you can in WordPress and within your community. So how do you begin that process and what does it look like?
So again, like I did it differently. So if you do it the way that I do it, everything becomes easier in that I never pitched anybody. I pitched 0 podcasts, 0 live streams, 0 WordCamps, but I've done them all. And the way that I did that was kind of through a lot of loitering. So I was loitering on Twitter a lot, and I was loitering on the post status Slack a lot, and building relationships, talking with people, just showing up every day. So the thing to remember is that everyone who is hosting an event, hosting a podcast, writing a blog, like everyone needs content, right? Everyone needs to fill in that next spot in their content calendar or their podcast episode calendar. And they're also always looking for guests. And so if you're showing up every day and kind of feeling like you're everywhere, then you're top of everyone's mind. And because you are building in public, you're showing people what you're doing, they kind of feel like they get to know you. You're not writing these low-hanging fruit viral threads all the time. You're doing high context stuff, you're making inside jokes. People really feel like they get to know you, and that when it comes for them to like plan their next quarter's podcast season or WordCamp, you're there and you get invited. And all I did was say yes every single time.
Saying yes is crucial.
As good. Yeah.
Probably the most important step.
And then like just try to be as good a guest as I could. And the other thing which I could have done more of, but I did do it a couple of times, is once you've gone on someone's show, ask them if they can introduce you to someone else. So that was kind of how I got my second show. So Matt Medeiros, who runs the Matt Report, reached out to me on Twitter.
A show that I've never been on.
He reached out to me on Twitter, I think really early on, like early 2020 or something, and asked if I could go on the show. And that was like my very first ever podcast interview. I was so scared. My voice was shaking when I was doing the introduction, and he had to cut the whole thing out. And he was like kind enough to not tell me that he was going to do it and like not tell me that I sucked. He was like, no, you're great, everything. But yeah, so he like just cut it out and did his own introduction of me. So like
first one's going to suck.
Scared.
The first one always sucks. Right.
But what I did after the show was I said like, hey, is there anyone else you can introduce me to that? And like, can I be on anyone else's podcast? And, Matt knows a whole bunch of people. So he introduced me to Jack and Ian. And so I got onto their podcast, Pressing Matters. And so that was kind of the start of it. And yeah, just kind of like constantly doing that, being available, that just has like helped in all the ways. So like, I don't know, Adrian, like, did you do like a lot of pitching?
So before I'll speak on that in a minute, but I just you just skipped past like a super important point nonchalantly. You said being available. Being available is probably the biggest change that a business owner, a networker, a salesperson can make to create drastic impact. Like bar none. If you were to walk away with like one thing, it's like just being available, posting your face everywhere, participating in conversations, giving of yourself freely. There's something in this universe called the law of reciprocity. And you may not subscribe to the whole like universal law thing, and that's fine. But the law of reciprocity basically is like whatever energy that you put into the universe is just the energy that you're going to get right back. And so if you are putting in availability into the universe of your knowledge and your expertise and your product, what you are going to receive in return is availability from the people that can help you. Podcasters, blog opportunities, conferences, events, speaking spots. That's just the way that it works. And there solicitation. You were about to ask me, did I solicit people? I'm lazy. I'm not lazy, but I like to seek efficiencies. easily set up a Facebook ad and wasted $3,000 because I didn't want to do the one-to-one, right? But that's a step that you can't skip. So when I first started doing like my whole podcast thing, and I did a number of them, I Googled WordPress podcasts and I submitted the guest form on every single show that was available. Must have been about 30 shows, and I heard back from 3 of them because, you know, not podcasters can be quite selective people.
Yeah.
They obviously want to give guests quality content, and I, at that point in time, just had no reputation. And you spend a lot of time building up your reputation. But there are podcasters out there that are very benevolent and will give everybody a chance and an opportunity. And I, before that time, had a fair amount of speaking experience and interview experience. I had come from sales and I'd come from public speaking as a background. So when I went on to those shows, I nailed it. And that snowballed in its own effect because, you know, I used those early shows, build a reputation. And then again, asking for the referral is the second most important thing that you can do, right? Because if you don't ask, you what is not asked is not given. Right? So if you ask, what are they going to do? Say no? No, they're not going to say no. They're like, yeah, absolutely. I know this other podcaster and I think it'd be a great fit for their show. I'll certainly like connect you to. And then it's in the other podcaster's hand at that point, whether they want to have you on the show or not. But no one's going to say, no, I'm not going to refer you. That was a terrible show. No one's going to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'd never get any guests. Like, no, they're not going to say that. Anyway. So I solicited people, but I think your way is better.
I think it's different. I think both ways work. Soliciting people is kind of like the one-to-one thing, right? But I guess like because I had already done the one-to-one thing for like sales, I didn't also want to be kind of selling myself to get onto podcasts and live streams and stuff. And so Twitter at that point, I guess, felt easier. One other thing with regards to loitering. So loitering isn't just, you know, lurking in the background and like not, you know, like being a creepy person in the shadows. Like that's not what I did. I was like an active loiterer. I should stop using the word loiter. But what I mean is like, so for example, I wanted to, and Jamie doesn't know this, but WordPress, Jamie runs this plugin company called WordPress, and he's been doing weekly Gutenberg related YouTube videos, and he's kind of been growing that for a while, and I've kind of followed his blog for a while even before he had YouTube. And so like when I saw that he started doing YouTube videos, I knew that I wanted to be featured in one of his YouTube videos, but I'd never spoken to him at that point in time, and I knew that he was kind of high profile enough that if I had just randomly reached out to him, he would probably just ignore me or, you know, or straight out say no. So what I did was I kind of followed him on Twitter, started responding to a bunch of his tweets, tagging him in things when I thought it was interesting, and just kind of building a relationship there. And then sure enough, after doing that for a while, and this wasn't like, you know, I wasn't doing this actively, I wasn't, you know, like stalking him or anything. It was just kind of like passive because like now I knew, you know, like, hey, I can like reach out to this person. And like I knew what they were interested in. They were interested in YouTube videos and Gutenberg and stuff like that. So you just like easily talk to him and like tag him and stuff. And then like sure enough, one day he reached out to me, DM'd me and asked if he could do a video on our plugin. And of course I said yes, right? And like that entire process didn't take that long. It was like, I don't know, like maybe 2 months of kind of passively like, hey, Jamie might be interested in this. And like, you know, like striking out a conversation. But like that process works so much better. And it scales so much better because it's not really an active effort on your part. It's just kind of you chatting out with people. And yeah, so I've kind of like leveraged that strategy a number of times now, and it's worked really well.
The nice thing about people who understand that being accessible and being available is part of their success. The nice thing is that those people are available. So by you being available, by them being available, you are afforded the opportunity to reach out to those people and participate in the same conversations that they're participating in, build that foundation so that eventually you can say, hey, I would, really love to be a part of this like YouTube series thing that you're doing. And what are they going to do? Say no? Absolutely not. They're not going to say no. And this is all in the context of like the WordPress community. A lot of you are not part of like the granola eating WordPress community open sourceness. Like that's not your speed. This strategy or this way of doing things is universally applicable to every business. It might not happen on Twitter. It might happen on Pinterest. It might happen on Facebook groups. It might happen on Reddit, right? Like it might happen in those like different places for different groups of different people with different interests, and that's okay.
Or even just showing up in a cafe every day, right? Like your local cafe, and like a bunch of business owners like have breakfast there. You show up every day. You're doing a thing. Like eventually, someone's going to be like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" And you're like, "Oh, I make websites." And they'll be like, "Cool, I need a website. Like, can you do it for me?" And like all you did is just sit in that cafe every day, right?
Absolutely. And it might not be podcasts, or it might not be not be like YouTube creators, or it might be a thread on Reddit, it might be a course, it might be a speaking spot physically, right? It might be a webinar. Like there's so many different ways that like the concept of availability can manifest itself. And it is just, I want to make it clear that this concept is universally applicable, not just for the WordPress people.
I want to give like a bad example so people kind of know that
what not to do.
I'm not always successful at this. So I hang out a lot on Twitter and I hang out a lot on Slack. I don't like Facebook and I never hang out there. And so one of the times where I did ask a podcaster like, hey, can you refer me to 2 other podcasts that might be interested in having me on? He referred me. Those 2 guys are super heavy on Facebook. They have their own Facebook groups. I think they have like a few thousand people on both of their Facebook groups. And I don't know them. I don't hang out on Facebook at all. And so we got as far as a couple of emails, we scheduled stuff, and then like things just kind of didn't happen after that. And again, it's not, like I could have, followed up. I could have been more hardcore about, following up and things like that. But it would probably have been irritating. And I think the reason why it fell through was because I wasn't as present or as top of mind on Facebook as I was on Twitter. And so I think like the lesson here is really like kind of being constantly present, being available, as Adrian talked about, and like building that reputation is what makes a difference for this kind of a stage. So you can't expect to be successful on multiple channels. Pick one that you like. So in my case, that's Twitter and Slack. I'm in there all day, every day, and just kind of go heavy in it. And there will be people from your target audience who are there all day, every day too. And those are the people that you will resonate with. And it's okay if Reddit isn't taking off for you or Pinterest isn't taking off for you. Like pick the ones that you like. That work.
Focus your efforts on what you're good at, right? With what you're familiar with. Once you've reached not necessarily critical mass, but you've reached a point where it's effortless, is when you can start to look at multiple channels and maybe enter something and that's out of your comfort zone. Yeah.
The last thing that I want to say about the 1 to some stuff is use the 1 to some opportunity to refine your sales pitch. So you get used to saying the same thing over and over and over. You go on a bunch of podcasts and you talk about your plugin or talk about your agency over and over and over. And you'll find over time that you are polishing your sales pitch. It's getting sharper, snappier, easier to understand. And what you want to pay attention for, or what you want to pay attention to is, can others say what you do or what you're good at? So how does, the podcast host introduce you, or how does the live streamer introduce you? Like, that's when you know you've got something right. You've done something right. If the podcaster is having trouble saying what you do, then you know that you still need to refine your sales pitch. Or maybe it's like not simple enough to understand or something like that. So that's kind of one of the goals of the 1 to some, because again, like, you want to do the right thing for the right stage, and you don't want to move to the 1 to many if you don't have a polished sales pitch, because you're going to be all over the place. And when you move to the 1 to many, you're going to not know who's listening to you or not know where your marketing message is going. And so you don't have any control over that. So you want to get it to a place where it's really refined before you move to the 1 to many. So that's the last thing that I want to say about the 1 to some stage.
Before we move on to 1 to many, I want to ask, is there a podcast or a show that you've done to date that makes you feel like you've made it, like you've accomplished what you set out to do?
I think,
or is there
irony,
a show that's still on your mind, or something, or a benchmark that's still on your mind that like you're still striving towards?
I think the irony is that, like, the Matt report would have been the answer that I would have given, but that turned out to be the first show that I did. Because like the Matt report was the only WordPress podcast I was listening to at the time. And it was like,
right.
Matt was the one who asked me on his show. Right now, I'm waiting on Paul from WP Tutes. I really want to get on his show.
That would be Paul, a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're listening. Yeah.
I'll send this. I don't personally know him, but I'll solicit him for you, so at least you don't have to have that bad interaction yourself. Okay. Carry
Does anyone
on.
have any questions of 1 to some?
We have a question from Tina Cook, and she's asking, can you give an example of how you refined your product description? But I don't think product description is specifically what you were talking about. You were talking about the pitch, and that's a little bit different than a product description. And I'll let you refine that.
Yeah, so I don't think I can, give this isn't the stage to, or sorry, this isn't the, like this webinar event isn't the time for us to like go into product positioning and descriptions and all of that. But what I can say is, what I can talk about is kind of the experience of it and what you can expect as well. Because I think a lot of time people underestimate how hard it is to come up with something simple. They hear a product description or positioning or tagline from Apple, and they're like,
value proposition is, I think, value proposition is, I think, what she meant.
Yeah, but like all of those things, right? Whether it's value proposition, positioning, branding, tagline, all of those things, like when you see the end result, it always sounds really polished and really easy and really simple. And you always feel like, oh, I could have come up with that. It's like obvious, right? But when you're doing it yourself, it always feels impossible. So like what I can say is what it should feel like, and it should feel painful. Like this should be something that you obsess over for 2 years before you're even close to having something that you are okay with. So like for me, the way that I obsess over it is website headline. So like to me, that's my value proposition. If I can get my website heading to say what I do and show the value in like those 5 to 10 words, then I'm onto something. And so I spend like pages and pages. I'll like write it down at 2 a.m. I'll be like writing headlines at 2 a.m. because like inspiration strikes. And I've just kind of done this over and over again for 2 years. And I'm still not where I want it to be, but I think I'm a lot closer. And so like, that's kind of what you should expect as well. Like, it's not going to be something that you get right away. And so what I do is I write the headline, obsess over it, and then I test it out. So I go on a podcast and then I say the headline that I've tried. So I was just on Chris's podcast, Chris Badgett, and I tested out the thing that I have now, which is half your, see now I've forgotten what it is. half your publishing time, double your distribution. So that's what I have right now. So like half your publishing time, because it's much easier to write newsletters with us, and double your distribution because now you can publish once and send it to your email subscribers and publish it on the web at the same time.
And I guess the actual name Newsletter Glue would translate that you're talking about newsletters and not something else like parcel distribution.
Yeah, I mean, like there's obviously like a context and story behind everything, but like, so that's the kind of thing that I'm constantly doing, like workshopping the ideas, and that's, I guess, what you can expect to do as well.
We have to move on because this is our 8-minute
Okay. So the final stage is one-to-many, and that's when you scale everything, right? You want it to be a compounding flywheel. The kinds of things that you're doing at this stage is content marketing, YouTube videos, paid ads. You have a team that's doing things for you. It's not just yourself anymore. And it still grows for a while if you stop for a while. Like that's kind of what it should feel like. So like if you're on the one-to-one or one-to-some stages, if you stop marketing, your business just stops. Like there's nothing goes. Like you can actually see where the cliff drops off, like where you drop off a cliff. When you reach the one-to-many stage, you can actually stop doing everything for a while. Like you can go take a 2-week holiday and your business is still going to grow. And obviously at some point that's going to stop, right? But the fact that it has enough momentum to keep going for a while is kind of what it should feel like at the one-to-many stage. And by this stage, you have 3 or more degrees of separation. So it's hard to tell where sales are coming from because there are multiple touch points, right? So someone might say, I found you on Twitter, but the reality is, no, they found you on a blog, they read that, then they saw a YouTube video, and then they like followed you on Twitter, and then they saw like a discount that you posted on Twitter and that caused them to buy, right? And like at that point, it becomes kind of impossible to tell what really happened. And again, that's kind of the story that you should expect to hear from the one-to-many stage. So for us, where we're at is we're kind of straddling the one-to-some and one-to-many stage for my plugin, Newsletter Glue. So what that means is that we are still doing all the podcasts and the events and the live streams, and we're moving towards also doing the content marketing. I don't want to do paid ads, but I'm thinking about doing YouTube. And I'm also growing a team. So all of that's kind of like been a whole different ball game for me. And it's been really tough. And it's taken so much longer than I expected every stage of the way. But it's been good.
When you put in the work, get the work out of it, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
It takes,
I think
these things take time.
I think another thing that is kind of symptomatic of that stage is that everything takes time. So like you have, like I thought, so in August, I started doing this in August. I started transitioning to the one-to-many stage in August. And I thought by December, my goal was to have 10K monthly visitors on the site. And by December, all I'd successfully done was tried to hire a bunch of writers and tried to hire a marketing person, and it was like not really going well. And so we're like restarting that entire process all over again in January. And I think like that's actually what it looks like. Like it's not this magical, we're going to start writing a bunch of blog posts and then like, hey, like suddenly we have 10K monthly visitors. It's, actually you trying to grow a team, you realizing you don't know how to write a job description, you realizing you don't know how to onboard the person, and all of that kind of messy stuff. And then like systemizing things, scaling things. I've written so many SOPs, like manuals, operating manual type documents for my marketing people. I've like done so many tiny videos to show people what kind of blog posts I expect, what the expectations are. All of that stuff is what you should expect to have happen in the one-to-many stage. And all of it takes so much longer than you expect, in contrast to the one-to-one where you get on a Zoom call, someone says yes or no on that Zoom call, or the one to some stage where you get on a podcast a day later, you see sales come in. On the one to many stage, it's all about growing, building the systems, and then seeing where the team takes you. And there's like a lag time for that. Okay, I'm done. That's all.
Okay, there's one question I want to address, and then I'm going to pass it back to you the next 3 minutes that we have to let others know how they can find out more about you, how they can work with you, and how they can reach you and learn more about your awesome journey. So there's just one question, or one comment rather, from Peter, which is a very common question, objection, something of that. And he's saying that this sounds like it would be much more, or something that would be much easier for or something like us as software companies to do, and the fact that we're actively like developing something, building in public, and that makes it easier for us to implement this kind of process. And I want to say, or I want to ask the question rather, is it because we're building software products because we have a very clear unique value proposition? I don't go on podcasts to talk about Groundhogg. I go on podcasts to share how I built Groundhogg, how I scaled a team, how I spent $100,000 and got absolutely nothing out of it, how I by myself built an audience, very much how Lesley today is sharing us how to build an audience. It's less about what you're selling. It's about what kind of experience and value that you're bringing to the conversation. Right? You as a LearnDash expert agency, do you just build websites? Because everybody builds websites, right? It's not that that's not something that's valuable, but just it's not unique. But are you an expert in how to design a course that actually has, a 90+% completion rate? How do you build a 90% completion rate course? How do you implement instructional design in an LMS product in order to increase student retention rates? Like that kind of unique value proposition, and discussing in open the process of creating that kind of system is incredibly unique and incredibly valuable. And I'd pitch to you that thinking of it in those terms is how you would essentially apply this to any business in any niche universally.
So I want to give two like real world examples. One is this company called Grow and Convert. They're a content marketing agency, and they grew basically like from this same approach. Like all their blog posts is basically them talking about what's working right now in content marketing for their clients. So they, do a bunch of the work, try a bunch of things, experiment, and add value for their clients. And then they blog about it. They tell the world, like, here's what's working right now. Like we've learned that pairing content marketing with some paid ads in a certain way helps drive the most awareness in a way that just one or the other doesn't quite work.
How do people reach you, and where can people find you?
They can reach me at newsletterglue.com for the website and my plugin. And if you want to find me on Twitter, it's at Lesley_pizza.
Okay. Thank you everybody for coming. Lesley, that was an awesome
Thanks,
presentation.
everyone.
Thank you for sharing.